Sponsored by Squarespace. Remember the good old days where the Alliance was all about getting together with the bros to reclaim Jerusalem on behalf of the Pope? Wrong video game, but more seriously, what happened to how the Alliance felt? What happened to grabbing your sword and killing the Horde? And what happened to my haircut? I had a transplant. This bit's the donor site. It'll be back to normal soon. And going back to the video, what happened to honor, nobility, and the ferocity of the Alliance lion? You know, these days we no longer stand as one, but as many, and that's led me to the core question of today's video. What's the point of the Alliance anymore? What is it? I mean, sure, we still love our factions, but what does the Alliance actually do? Because when you get down to it, it kind of feels like the Alliance just died off screen and no one really noticed. And we've done a few videos about the Horde, maybe getting a few rough storylines rolling into midnight, all the stuff with the Sons of Lothar. But the core of their faction does actually remain intact. They still are a group of misfits banded together against a dangerous world. The Alliance stands for being the good guys. They don't seem to have a purpose or a mission. No real reason for the unity that they're supposed to represent in the modern Warcraft setting. And what brought that into stark contrast was actually Blizzard's new novel. It's called Blood Ties, and in it, we discover that Anduin's back. Yeah, he returned to Stormwind, but he's not quite ready to be king, and that's left Stormwind once again tossing a crown between Turalyon and Genn. And with that, leadership of the Alliance is hanging up in the air. I've also got a bit of a challenge for you. Give me 30 minutes, and with today's sponsor, you'll finally have the website that you've been meaning to build. So Squarespace is an easy-to-use site builder and award-winning templates, but they have developed so much as a platform lately. Design Intelligence is their mix of tools that help you access their 20 years of design experience easily. It starts with Blueprint AI, and that starts with a few questions. Once you answer those, you'll use their interactive design system to build your own template, just the way that you like it, but with them keeping you right with designer-picked fonts and color palettes, all matched to your aesthetic, and then from there, you can iterate on your copy and your content. It's all seamlessly integrated, and if you've just been overwhelmed in the past, or you just want to start quickly with all of your bases covered, this set of features is literally made for you. And their core platform is always growing as well. They've got native video support, so you can have a gorgeous player, you can have video gallery layouts that are all interoperable with their e-commerce tools. It's real impressive, and when I needed sites, Squarespace was my first port of call because they make it easy. So, to get started today, go to squarespace.com/BellularGaming, check out Design Intelligence, and when you're ready to send your site live, use code BellularGaming for 10% off your first purchase of a site or domain. Quick recap. So, Anduin led the Alliance to victory in the Fourth War, then he was kidnapped by the jailer, subjected to torture, and made to do terrible things. His body would go and do the terrible things, he was basically stuck inside his own brain as an observer to those things, and, secret is he did actually say he felt a bit of a rush of power whenever he was doing evil Death Knight things. Yeah, fair enough. Being evil Death Knight would be kind of fun. Anyway, he then returned to Azeroth, and just pissed off for a bit. He vanished into the wilds, and that left Turalyon as the regent of Stormwind. More importantly, as the High King of the Alliance. Now, in the recently released Blood Ties novel, Turalyon, Illyria, and Arator travel to the Broken Isle, where they find a fresh demon infestation at Fellsoul Holt. And, on the way, Turalyon catches us up with Stormwind politics. Let's do politics. We learned that Genn Greymane was willing to mine Stormwind whilst Turalyon went on his family adventure, and it seems the two may have been sharing the weight of that crown. And going into midnight, Turalyon's arc, we know, will pull him away from Stormwind and away from leadership of the Alliance, but he won't mind. He didn't actually like the position, he found it stressful, he rubbed people the wrong way, including Matthias Shaw and Genn Greymane, if, of course, we remember their initial reaction to his promotion. They were not best pleased. So, that's one thing established. Genn is currently holding down the fort. But then Turalyon casually drops that Anduin is in fact back, but he's not taken up his official title. Turalyon respects Anduin taking some time to heal, but, of course, with his attention now firmly on the Sunwell, Anduin may actually have to, step up and do the whole king thing, or actually make the call to just leave Genn as the guy holding the whole kingdom together. But not just the Kingdom of Stormwind, because I guess Genn's also High King of the Alliance. Well, Turalyon is, but, if he's off on a family adventure, who is Genn, I guess? It's a bit weird, and there's a couple of things to unpack here. First, Anduin not taking back his title isn't abdication. It's simply him waiting, and if he is going to take the crown, then that will be something we'll see in-game, not a casual conversation in a book. So I don't actually mark that bit as a bad thing. This is basically just the first reference to his return, so it's probably setting up him picking up the crown again. But second, and perhaps more importantly, Stormwind didn't have a king nearly as long as it actually had a king. That's not what's killing the Alliance, though. It's not just about Stormwind. And maybe if you're an Alliance player whose main doesn't reside in Stormwind, you may be thinking, what about the rest of us? And that brings me to the real issue. It's the position above King of Stormwind, the position of High King of the Alliance, that is the real one that matters. It's a role meant to be like the Horde's war chief, but forged by Stormwind's greatest king, Varian Wrynn. And man, things sure do feel different now that he's been dead for as long as he's been dead. To get us to this whole High King place, you first need to know the spark notes of Varian. So, Varian was kidnapped by Katrina Prester, better known as Onyxia, in the year 25 ADP. When that happened, the kingdom was left to Bolvar. Yes, Mr. Crispy from the Shadowlands. Now, Varian then returned a year later, but he returned as the gladiator Logosh, and he reclaimed his crown. There's a whole story there that we don't need to recap now. It's pretty weird. There's actually two Varians. But anyway, just in time for Wrath of the Lich King, all that is resolved. Varian is back. For us players at the time, it was huge. Stormwind finally had a king, and a bitch in New Harbor. It was all exciting, and it's also just about when the first major faction war of World of Warcraft kicked off, and that's with the Battle of Undercity. It was pretty damn cool. Though not the point of this video. Cut to year 30, and we're going to Pandaria. But in the years between, Varian has actually forged the Alliance into something new. He's forged them into a unified army, and he's created a new position, High King. And this High King would be the commander of all Alliance forces. Of course, 2 years later, the Legion returns, and as High King, Varian leads the Alliance until he takes Felguard spears to the chest and gets disenchanted, upon which time Anduin becomes High King of the Alliance. And you know how the rest happens. He grinds out a victory in the Fourth War, and then he gets kidnapped by the jailer, at which point we're back to Stormwind having a regent, not an actual king. That is the case in Stormwind as of the year 35 ADP. Dragonflight's time skip, though, took us to the year 40, and the War Within is set in the year 42. That means that, well, they had 9 years with a king, and 8 years without a king. But that's not what matters most to this arc. What matters is that Varian Wrynn forged the position of High King. And it made sense for him. He had the exact qualities to make it work. Fierce, loyal, an incredible leader, an incredible warrior. Anduin had huge shoes to fill, not just as King of Stormwind, but as the ultimate authority of the Alliance. Every victory, every defeat, every death was on his shoulders. That was a core narrative in battle for Azeroth. And then the title passed to Turalyon, who people were suspicious of, and now are suspicious of again. But Turalyon wasn't the old hell fella hanging out in Stormwind. There was also Genn Greymane, who really is quite an old dude. I mean, he was already an old dude during the Second War, which was nearly 4 decades ago. So I guess being a furry's really, really good for your lifespan. Is he the High King? Is there a High King? Would Genn have the authority to call the Vindicators, the Sentinels, the Griffin Riders, and the Steam Tanks on some offensive? No, probably not. It certainly doesn't seem that way. I mean, the Alliance barely scrounged together a small expeditionary force to Khazalgar because they were too busy running policing actions in the Arathi Highlands. So it seems that without a High King, and without a proper king in Stormwind as well, the Alliance really is scattered and a bit meaningless. And going forward, it's not exactly looking great. The Alliance truly is a shambles. Let's do a health check in the Modern Alliance, starting with the Night Elves. Because for a good chunk of the Fourth War, the Night Elves basically weren't in the Alliance. I mean, they were politically, but under the advice of Matthias Shaw and backed by Anduin, Tyrande garrisoned her Sentinel army in Feralus. But you see, they did that based on bogus information that was planted by Horde spies, and all of this fake news led to the surprise special operation up to Ashenvale that eventually led to the burning of Teldrassil. At that point, Tyrande basically noped out of the Alliance. She became the Night Warrior, and basically she dedicated everything to just killing Sylvanas. But the thing to understand is just how many Night Elves died in the Fourth War, and the likes of Teldrassil. They were beaten back, and when they re-emerged into the story, not that long after Shadowlands, they veered their whole story into renewing their connection to the World Trees through Emirdrassil. And when that was done, Tyrande and Malfurion decided to retire, wrapping up the modern Night Elf story. There we go, it's done. It's not really done. Where it leaves them is vaguely this. Chandra showed up to a meeting after Dalaran was destroyed, promising sentinels who wound up under Turalyon's command on Khazalgar. In Midnight, she will play a role in renewing the Sunwell, in some way, shape, or form. So the Night Elves are there, and technically, Blizzard did say in this expansion the Elven tribes would be reunited. The Night Elves are some of those Elven tribes. The effect of some of all this cosmic madness is the Night Elves have quietly stepped back from Alliance politics. And as you're about to learn, the other Alliance diehards are also set for a major distraction. Dwarves and Gnomes came in absolutely clutch to the Alliance. Turns out, literally having tanks is actually quite useful. But what's rough for the Alliance is that Dwarves and Gnomes are about to get the conclusion to a story that began way back in the day with newbie Dwarves and Gnomes killing their first Trogs in Khaz-Modan. And that is the story of the creators, of the Titans, from Ironbrand's dig site to Uldaman, from Ulduar to Mechagon, right through to the seat of the Pantheon. The Dwarves and Gnomes are finally getting their payoff. Likely not in Midnight, of course. What I'm talking about is the events of the War Within, and more importantly, where they'll all lead in The Last Titan. Now, these races will always be Alliance diehards, but when the Titans return, which does look quite likely, and it also seems likely we may even go to war with some of them, well, the once children of the Titans, these two groups, will be rather busy. Though the Alliance do have other factions, other diehards like the Wildhammer and Kultiran humans exist, and races like the Draenei I think can always be trusted to get on board with doing the right thing for the Alliance. But with Valen's intention to build a new Draenei city in Azeroth, you may have missed that, but it is a recent plot point from their Heritage Armor questline, I am convinced that, perhaps like with Silvermoon, their race will host some sort of cross-faction hub in the near future. And that'll be important for the Alliance because, as of right now, they don't really have a proper foothold on that continent. But as we move to the other groups, well, the Worgen have reconquered Gilneas, leaving them basically busy reconstructing the whole place. They're doing that effort alongside the Forsaken in a total table flip of Warcraft's politics. I mean, if Worgen and Forsaken can get along clearing out Lordaeron, then what's actually left for the Alliance to do? There's been a thing brimming up through this video. The Alliance has become less useful, right? They seem like they've had less of a place. Also, they've got substantially weaker and more fractured. But even more deeply, what is their purpose? Because that's rarely something that's engaged with in an interesting way within the actual game. Now, this does also bring me to the other races, whose inclusion in the Alliance increasingly points to how irrelevant the Alliance is. You got the Pandaren, Earthen, and Drakthir. Yeah, they're all in the Alliance, but their stories push toward unity under Azeroth, not towards the factions. So you do have to ask, what is the Alliance actually doing for them? And, well, are they only in the Alliance because that's how World of Warcraft is set up? You can see that the narrative of the Alliance is really beginning to strain. Now, there are other races too. There are the Jinyu, there are some recently converted Eredar, but the biggest concern right now are obviously the Void and High Elves, who, in all likelihood, will, well, settle in post-Midnight Quel'Thalas and largely squash their beef. At least that's what we all imagine. That will end their isolation, and it will place them, once Alliance forces, in the heart of one of the Horde's most powerful kingdoms. And not for war, but for peace. A peace that seems to have put both factions on life support, even though, yeah, if you're an Alliance character and you walk into the wrong part of Silvermoon, yeah, the guards will just kill you on sight. Now, all of this is a bit weird. The Alliance just feels like it has less of a vision than the Horde. And for as much as Varian Wrynn homogenized the Alliance behind him, he at least was able to drive it forward, in a way that still felt like he was driving forward the faction. As much as Anduin can say for the Alliance, I think with Anduin we've went into smaller scale character drama, which isn't exactly what many want from, ultimately, a player faction in an MMORPG that is defined by those factions. Which isn't to say the Alliance doesn't have screen time, it just feels like they have less vision than the Horde. The screen time certainly is there. Alliance characters continue to dominate the expansion A-plots, but, well, they're slave to those narratives. And that's kind of forced them to push faction identity aside so that they can fight the next big bad, which is kind of the core of the problem. That's always been a great thing within Warcraft, but the factions being distinct entities has also long been a great thing of Warcraft. And right now, the Alliance just feels on ice. Not because it's dead. No, it'll come back whenever Blizzard needs it. It's just, right now, currently impossible to tell those good Alliance stories. A few recent times where they've tried, looking at you, Red Dawn, haven't exactly ended up well. Okay, the High King problem. Now the Turalyon has become, well, whenever Midnight launches and he does the intro thing, will become the self-described savior of the Sunwell. Yes, that is a thing he says early in the next expansion. We can basically look back at his tenure as High King of the Alliance. We've had people around him, like Matthias Shaw, be suspicious. He's rubbed people the wrong way. He is a little bit of a light zealot. I mean, just look at his history. But the only thing that he actually did, geopolitically, was administer the armistice between the factions and make sure that the Alliance didn't blow up. And I think this all shows that the whole idea of a High King is kind of difficult. It makes it hard to tell the story. If Turalyon goes and uses his power for evil, and they take his character that way, it's not just his character. He's basically High King, is the acting regent. He leads their armies, so it would impact the entire setting. It maybe would even re-spark a war, maybe a siege of Stormwind, right? But if that was too much and we were to play it safe and he only did good things, then, well, his coming light blindness story would also ring hollow. So instead, what's basically happened is he and Blizzard have just kept Stormwind on maintenance mode. Whenever they need to, they just chuck the crown over to Genn. He just doesn't do anything. He just sits there and, I don't know, purrs. And now what we're seeing is that Blizzard are soft launching Anduin's return to Stormwind. They've put the first plot beat into the Blood Ties novel. That will eventually lead him back to the throne. And then we'll get back to the real question. What is Anduin? Is he a character larger than life and setting defining in a way where he feels separate to us and larger, greater, like a High King, just like Varian did? Or is he our friend, where we spend a lot of our time thinking about his personal emotional growth? It's hard to do that for a High King for a faction that's struggling with its identity, struggling with direction, and keeps on being sacrificed for the character-to-character soap opera that Blizzard does quite like to do. It's all a bit weird. These are questions that are a bit too big for the World Soul saga, where, first we've got to face off against the cosmic manifestation of the all-consuming void, then we'll meet and probably fight the light, and then the Titans will come back, and we'll probably fight them too. That does mean that for the time being, the Alliance will be a political background organization that will pump out soldiers whenever we need them. And that means that there will be fertile ground for Anduin to return and to forge a modern alliance that will actually mean something to people. And my hope is that with Anduin spending all of these years canonically, figuring himself out and working through his problems after the Shadowlands, maybe when he returns, he'll have aged, matured. Maybe he will come across more kingly, more regal, more larger than life. Perhaps a High King. The sort of character who could be a driving force of the Alliance, actually pushing it into new storylines. Only time will tell, but as a lifelong Alliance player, and that does count for a few people in our office, this video just sums up the vibes, the angst, the just way that giving a shit about the Alliance has not been a thing for quite some time indeed. What do you think if you're an Alliance player? And what do you think if you're a Horde player? Are the Alliance just so lame that the idea of smacking us about doesn't even get you excited anymore? And if you want your World of Peacecraft angst validated, well, go check out this video. It's about what's going on with the Sons of Lothar. You may not know what that means, but trust me, you'll find the video interesting.